Welcome to Intelligence Gateway.
C++ Programming Course, Lecture 01. Module 1 Introduction to C++. Welcome to Module 1 Introduction to C++, Overview of the C++ programming language, setting up your development environment, writing your first C++ program, understanding variables and data types in C++, conditional statements and loops in C++. Conclusion, what you've learned in Module 1. Welcome to Module 1 Introduction to C++. Welcome to Module 1 Introduction to C++. In this module, we will be exploring the fundamentals of C++ programming. Whether you are a complete beginner or have some experience with other programming languages, this module will provide you with a solid foundation in C++. Our goal is to introduce you to the basics of C++ programming in a friendly and approachable manner. We want to ensure that you feel comfortable with the language and confident in your ability to write simple programs. By the end of this module, you will have a good understanding of the syntax and structure of C++ programs, as well as how to use variables, data types, conditional statements, and loops. Overview of the C++ programming language. C++ is a general-purpose programming language that was developed by Bjarne Stroustrup in 1983. Is an extension of the C programming language and provides additional features such as object-oriented programming, templates, and exceptions. One of the key benefits of C++ is its efficiency. It allows for low-level memory manipulation and has a relatively small runtime compared to other languages. This makes it ideal for systems, programming, game development, and other performance-critical applications. Setting up your development environment. To begin programming in C++, you'll need to set up your development environment. This involves installing the necessary software and configuring your system to support C++ programming. The process may seem daunting at first, but with some guidance, it can be straightforward. First, you'll need to download and install a C++ compiler. This is a program that translates your code into machine-readable instructions that your computer can execute. There are several options available, including GCC, Clang, and Microsoft Visual C++. Once you've installed your compiler of choice, you'll need to configure your system to recognize it. This typically involves adding the compiler's directory to your system's path variable, which tells your operating system where to find the compiler when you run it from the command line. Writing your first C++ program. Now that we've covered the basics of the C++ programming language, it's time to dive into writing your first program. The syntax and structure of a C++ program may seem intimidating at first, but with practice, you'll soon become comfortable with it. To start, open up your preferred text editor or integrated development environment IDE and create a new file with a CP extension. This will be your C++ source code file. Begin by typing #include iostream at the top of your file, which tells the compiler to include the iostream library for input and output operations. Next, add the main function, which is the entry point for your program. Inside the main function, use the std_out object to print out a simple message, such as hello, world. Finally, add a return statement at the end of the main function to indicate that the program has finished running. Once you've written your program, save the file and compile it using a C++ compiler. If there are no errors, you should be able to run your program and see the message printed out in the console. Congratulations, you've just written and executed your first C++ program. Understanding variables and data types in C++. In C++, a variable is a named memory location that stores a value. Before using a variable, it must be declared with a specific data type, which determines the size and format of the stored value. C++ supports a wide range of data types, including integers, floating point numbers, characters, and Boolean values. To declare a variable, you use the syntax data type variable name. For example, int age declares an integer variable named age. You can also assign an initial value to a variable when it is declared, like this, data type variable name equals initial value. 4. Example, int age equals 30, declares an integer variable, named age and initializes it with the value 30. Conditional statements and loops in C++. Conditional statements and loops are fundamental programming constructs in C++. They allow you to control the flow of your program based on certain conditions or criteria. Conditional statements, such as if-else statements, enable you to execute different blocks of code depending on whether a condition is true or false. Meanwhile, loops, such as for loops and while loops, allow you to repeat a block of code multiple times until a certain condition is met. For example, let's say you want to write a program that calculates the sum of all even numbers between 1 and 10. You could use a for loop to iterate over each number between 1 and 10 and use an if statement to check if the number is even. If it is, you can add it to a running total. Once the loop has finished, you'll have the sum of all even numbers between 1 and 10. Conclusion: what you've learned in Module 1. In Module 1, we have covered a lot of ground in our introduction to C++ programming. We started by providing an overview of the language and its features before moving on to setting up our development environment and writing our first program. We then explored variables and data types, as well as conditional statements and loops. Through this module, you have gained a solid foundation in C++ programming and should feel confident in your ability to write basic programs. However, it is important to remember that programming is a skill that requires practice and continual learning. As you move forward in your programming journey, be sure to continue building on the concepts and skills you have learned in this module.
Thanks for watching. For more information, like, comment, and subscribe our channel.